This is Dr. Fox. Thank you all for your continued support for CRPN and CRPN Central. For more information about our mission, please contact us today at info@crpaynet.com for details.
All right, sites. It's enrollment time. I know this is a challenging trial, but I appreciate you setting up and stepping up with your community to enroll. Speaking of which, what's your enrollment strategy anyways?
Have no fear, sponsor. We got you. We have a huge presence in the community and people know us. If a patient walks into our door and asks to be a part of a trial, we'll be right here and ready to screen them.
That's an interesting strategy. Our site has spent the past 3 years building up a patient database of interested trial participants, and we continue to build it every week. In patient outreach, health fairs, and advertising campaigns, if the database has eligible and interested patients, we'll give them a call and schedule a screening right away.
Wow. Those are definitely interesting recruitment strategies. I'm looking forward to seeing how they...
There we go. We had 3 screening visits today.
What? How in the world did you do that so quickly?
I agree. That's amazing. Well done. It looks like that database is really paying off.
Now, wait just a minute, sponsor. We have an awesome reputation, and it's only a matter of time before our community...
Hey, there's another 4 screening visits, and we have 6 more scheduled for next week.
This is amazing. We will make enrollment goals in no time.
Oh, come on. How is this fair? We haven't even had a chance to enroll one.
Well, what they're doing is working. Maybe you could explore these database strategies that seem to help screen faster.
Maybe you're right, sponsor. We'll take a look. In the meantime, we did have one screening visit today. Turns out it was a screen failure.
Databases, the technology that is taking our industry by storm, and the same technology that is either so cumbersome or cyber-threatening that sites aren't allowed to use them, or so unreachable that the industry cannot standardize how to use it. Data can be the new gold if we let it, but only if we empower the correct stakeholders to use it and implement the right tools to find, identify, and use it to enhance our clinical trials. Sites. It's 2024. In the age of AI and advanced searching features, there's zero reason why we at the front lines should not consider technology to augment and enhance our operations. Understand your organization, find the technology that meets its standards, and start the evolution to be a competitive and productive member of this industry. Sponsors. Sites are not against screening and recruitment database technology. They are against your screening and recruitment database technology, combined with the dozens of single-point solutions that are thrown at them across their trial portfolios. Give sites the autonomy to select and develop processes around their own technologies to better serve you and increase the quality of your trials. If you can do this, you will see truly how well-oiled this industry machine can be for everyone, and importantly, what it can do for the patients who otherwise would have not been safe. Welcome to CRPN Central, the official podcast of the Clinical Research Payment Network. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Fox. CRPN Central discusses the real issues with our clinical research industry to explore and identify mutually beneficial solutions for all of our stakeholders. Clinical research sites must continually have to screen and recruit potential trial participants, sometimes across millions of records. The task can be daunting and overwhelming at times. And as far as we have come with advanced AI and record screening solutions, our sites continue to face challenges utilizing, integrating, and even accessing this technology. How do we utilize databases to optimize potential trial participant recruitment for efficient and productive clinical research performance? Today, we will discuss patient databases at our clinical research sites, defined as digital records that store patient-related information such as medical history, diagnoses, treatments, and test results that are used at local research sites to assess the inclusion and exclusion criterion of a clinical trial protocol for enrollment qualification. First, we will speak with a tech-savvy professional who develops technology for his own research site. Then, we will talk with an experienced professional who has launched accessible and revolutionary solutions across the industry. To maintain valid comparisons, both interviews will use the same questions, and my guests did not know the questions before the interviews. We will reconvene after our interviews to compare answers and perhaps identify how we, as an industry, may better utilize patient databases for faster, efficient, and high-quality clinical research performance. Our first guest is a new graduate and site professional in our industry. Samir Huda is the Business Development and IT Manager at the Houston-based Prolato Clinical Research Center. At Prolato, Samir leads marketing efforts, including some amazing IFTAR celebrations with Diversa trials, and not only manages IT infrastructure, but also literally develops customized systems to the needs of his sites, his PIs, and his administration. Samir is a brilliant mind on our front lines, and I am so thankful he is willing to speak with us today. Please welcome with me Mr. Samir Huda. Mr. Samir Huda, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central today.
Of course, thanks so much, Daniel, for having me.
Would you be willing to introduce yourself to the audience?
My name is Samir Huda. I am the business development / marketing / miscellaneous for Prolato Clinical Research Center. We are an independent clinical research center that started about 5 years ago. We mainly deal in nephrology and rare diseases, and that's how we started. But over the past year, we've been expanding to other pathologies like cardiovascular and getting more high enrollment studies. We're right at the brink of exploding, so Prolato's been investing in a lot of different technologies, softwares, vendors, companies. Hopefully you'll be hearing a lot more of us in the coming future.
First thing that comes to mind is you just said that as a result of your need to expand, you are investing in technology right now.
A lot of sites get to a point where they've met their baseline, but then after like that 1 or 2 year mark, you start having those retained earnings, which allow you to invest in either more niche talent, proprietary software, buildings, material, equipment, whatever the case may be. It's just very important to like plan it out and have a budget in mind.
If you want to scale to an appropriate rate, there's a time where unless you hire things like an academic medical center and you have a bunch of people, Excel spreadsheets, and a lot of the manual processes of your startup sites, they're just not going to do it.
Yeah, there's a difference between maybe doing 10 studies with 5 employees or whatever and doing over 40 plus and managing 20 different people. Whenever there's that many things happening in an Excel or a file database or whatever it might be, there's always some sort of issue that's prone to happen. And cookie cutter solutions aren't always the best thing for businesses, especially when you're dealing with critical things like patient healthcare and all that sort of stuff. We actually decided to create our own in-house ERP system that kind of assists our CTMS, and it's been working out so far pretty well for us.
Today's topic is databases, specifically those databases that we as sites have to navigate, develop, access for patient recruitment. I'm going to ask you a series of questions today.
Okay.
And those questions were already asked to another individual. And we're going to take what you have answered in these questions and we're going to compare them to those that were answered from the other individual. And then let's see if we can find any similarities on maybe some of the best practices that we can use for access, development, or use of patient databases for patient recruitment.
Okay. I'm still pretty new to this, but I'll try my best to answer the questions.
You may be new, but you're good.
Thanks.
You have used patient databases at Prolato, right?
Yes, whether it be working with different vendors and finding patients that might qualify so that we can flag them for their doctors or our own CTMS, whatever the case might be. We've worked with plenty of different softwares, EMRs, EDCs, whatever you name it. Ourselves, all of our coordinators, every one of our staff basically has to deal with 8+ softwares at any given time. And it's kind of become like one of those things, like if you're in clinical research, you know you have to have at least 40 different accounts for whatever you're doing. There's too many different providers. And hopefully in the future, we see kind of an aggregation of all these different technologies. And if not, the software becomes connected. Hopefully they have like some sort of standardized API where they can all talk to each other a little bit more. And I know that was a topic at SOS a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Everyone's looking for that single sign-on holy grail. And I just don't think anyone has touched it yet. We're still working on it.
I think it's sooner than we think. Hopefully we'll be able to have a all-in-one screener for entire databases in the next 2-3 years.
They may have the technology, we'll see, but it's all about that adoption and acceptance.
Yeah.
And that's where it's going to be far more about boots on the ground, letting sites know that these are opportunities, making sure that we can raise awareness so that we can actually get adoption of those systems.
I think once pharma becomes somewhat usable and pharma companies companies figure out about it, they already have all the hospital connections. They're just going to be deploy, 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 and we'll give you money, money, money.
Can you walk me through the creation and use of patient databases in clinical trial recruitment?
It's kind of different through a bunch of different sites. Some use pre-made software. We decided to use Excel for a lot of our different activities because it's very configurable. You can control sign-on access, all that sort of stuff. And that's already part of our 365 suite. So we didn't really look into it too much. The company was running fine, but around the time where I rejoined, we were seeing like an uptick in things getting deleted, people writing over each other's comments. If people leave, it's hard to track how to remove all their access. Audit trails aren't as good. We looked around at different recruitment softwares and all that. Nothing really worked with the flow that we've already developed. We had our own process and we found a software that fits around it. We didn't find a software and adapt our process around that. Essentially what we did for our recruitment database, we looked at our Excel, looked at the process that all of our recruiters have to go through and consulted with them to figure out the best location for all the different panels, how to aggregate it, what notifications to send, how to generate reports. We really just looked at our recruiters and asked them, what do you need to do your job better? What are the current issues that we have with Excel? With that feedback, we developed a system and we've been using it since February, and it's provided a lot more and more unique opportunities that we didn't initially plan for, like invoicing. Creating an invoice instead of taking like 10 minutes, it can now take 10 seconds. It gives me an easy place to store a bunch of internal documents, chat agents, whatever you name it. It's good to have like a central place for all your tools. And I think that because we have so many different vendors and studies and all that, it's good to have one central place to track how many people came into your site, how many people you've called, which coordinators are doing the calling. If there's anyone who has like a bad baseline week, I can track that. So on a week-to-week basis, I can see how many activities my coordinators have done. Honestly, it's just about listening to the problems and developing solutions around it.
How in the world did you get so good at starting to develop databases and database tracking and things like that?
I don't even consider myself good. It's more just finding the right tools to use and developing that foundation. Depending on skill level, there's a lot of different technologies you can use. Even Microsoft has their own Power Apps. A lot of companies use that. There's Drona, which is a full low-code backend database where you choose where everything's being stored, and then there's things in the middle. It's really just about choosing the right technology and doing basic research on it. I think what's more important is being able to effectively communicate with your peers what's the issue and how can I make it less of an issue.
Do you use this technology or something like this to generate participant databases or potential recruiting databases for enrollment?
We mainly use real-time CTMS for that because that's where we store medical records and patient information. But the goal is to eventually have like a fully in-house third-party software where everything from start to finish is entirely tracked. There's also a lot of things about security and vetting the different vendors you work with, making sure that there's federated access, everything's HIPAA compliant.
The last thing you ever want is to be hacked or leaked or scammed or have ransomware around your healthcare information. How do you grow that patient database in your community?
There's obviously many, many different ways that you can grow your database. You can work with different physicians. You can do community outreach. You can use your sponsor money to work with the vendors. Honestly, like we're still trying to figure out what the best way is. We recently started Google Ads and a couple of other things. It's really just about experimenting and figuring out what works with your study selection. It's harder to recruit for lupus studies than it is for like dermatitis. It's really just about knowing what studies you have and trying to figure out what's the best balance. So for like rare diseases, we've typically found that the best way to do it is to interact with the doctors and physicians directly and have them recommend studies right then and there when they're with the patient. And then for the more higher enrollment, we typically do health fairs or work with vendors that are paid for by sponsors.
You said you use Google Ads. You might do like health fairs or outreach or even some of the doctors. Somehow, some way, there's like an onboarding of the patient information into your database. So how does that work?
I'm working on revising it, but right now we have real time integrated onto our website. So whenever anything happens, it goes directly through there. They basically add the medical records and all that to a real time when they're talking to the patient, but then they add the recruitment activity into the tracker.
Do sites ever use QR codes?
Yeah, so all of our flyers actually have a QR code that will lead to an application page. The patient fills out their information on a HIPAA secure channel. It gets sent to our database. Our recruiters will add it to their list of people to call. They'll call them up. If they qualify, they'll go to the coordinator. The coordinator will pre-screen them and then so on.
So do they ever just sign up without a trial?
We don't really have any like healthy patient trials right now, but we do just add them to our database.
How long does it take for your database to grow to certain sizes?
Really just depends on how good you collect your data and how fast you're expanding. I'll say say that they're not correlated, because you can be expanding really fast and have an awful database because you don't know anything about your patients.
Even maybe some of the data that you collect, you have to be very conscious about what you collect, right?
Yeah. A lot of these platforms, they make it a little bit hard to collect this information, and there's a lot of copy and pasting. We work with our coordinators to figure out like what's the easiest way for them, what's their workflow process. For some of them, it's easier just to upload a file rather than to just copy and paste it. And because it's not something that's looked at daily or even monthly, it's fine to have it as a file. Being dynamic allows you to really fix issues before they start.
What are the benefits of using current databases to screen and recruit for patients?
They are amazing for starting up sites because it lays out the foundation of how you're supposed to do things. But when you do things differently, you can't really modify that system. The main flaw I see with current CTMS systems is that they tend not to be very customizable. The people making it probably have seen one way of clinical research, but having like a more site to site, almost as a consulting thing, might be of benefit for certain sites. There's a lot of different benefits of having control over your data and understanding what's actually happening in your site. And you're not really able to do that without
that kind of a freedom.
Exactly.
Could you imagine trying to run clinical research without databases?
People use paper, but I'm a little bit younger, so I can't deal with paper.
Can't remember those days.
Yeah, it's a working process.
It has absolutely revolutionized how we as sites can bring on patients and studies and things like that. It can get tricky with 40 different logins because frankly, it's just way too many silos, but there is a reason why we're going this way. It's just a matter of trying to streamline it to a point where everyone can be on the same page.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see where the industry goes in the next couple of years, because I feel like we're all realizing that having all these third-party vendors, yeah, there's a lot of solutions, but no one knows where the solutions are, and the solutions are so fractionated that you can't actually use most of the tools that you want to. What that leaves us with is that we're not paying for like 7 different tools and migrating the data between everything or doing double entry, so we're like, screw it, we're just making our own.
Do you think it's going to be easier for sites to learn how to do this with the development of AI?
I don't think AI will necessarily help the development of ERP systems. I guess you could give it like an Excel sheet and be like, teach me how to build an ERP system around this. I feel like ERPs might lead into AIs, where if you structure your ERP correctly, you can use that to generate insights. That's what we're doing right now. It's something in the works, but we're developing data sets and language models to basically understand what patients are saying. So we know we can automatically flag this patient's been scheduled, this patient has XYZ, this patient might qualify for this study. Or more data means more power. If you structure it correctly, if you collect it responsibly, you can build something truly amazing.
How do you structure data correctly?
The interesting answer is that there's no 100% correct way to structure it. It's just about planning things out and categorizing correctly, I'd say. I found categorizing and containerizing all these different forms and separating it out is really important. Even if they're hidden, you can basically hop through the different views. Because they're structured or separated, you can restrict access or give your recruiting physicians an entirely different portal, but they all feed to the same database.
As long as Prolato is structuring it all the same way, as long as you don't have structures in different ways across the same forms or formats, then at least you can have a little bit of a standardization internally.
And then it helps with our other sites as well, because we're just able to add all those activities into our database and it all just grows together. We have a couple of other sites that have been set up and a couple more that are going through their setup process. All of them are going to be using the same system.
What do you think are some of the challenges that we face right now?
I'd say the main issues that we really have is just tracking activity. I'm working on getting like some sort of API connected where they can just call directly from their laptop, but it's kind of hard to track the productivity of every specific call because some calls are just like, hi, and then they hang up instantly. That's a little bit hard to do. Recruitment is so personal and it varies so much that you can't expect numbers out of people for recruitment. You can create baselines and detect when things might be up, but it really just varies so much.
A phone call, is that the only outcome as a result of utilizing a patient database?
You can use patient databases for like calls. You can flag certain patients, do an EMR requisition request, and basically be like, these patients are pre-qualified, they have hypertension, they're on a statin, and then basically flag them so that whenever they talk to their doctor and then whenever you call them afterwards, it's more of a warm lead. You can use databases to do site feasibility. There's various things you can use the data for. It's more just about being conscientious and smart enough to use it because it's there. I like data and I like seeing the trends behind it. Having a foundation makes it really satisfying to watch the progression and the growth of your company.
And I've always heard there's a term someone says, and I don't know if you've heard this, but it said something like, our industry is currently drowning in data but starving for information.
Yes, that's exactly it. There's so much information. These protocols are like 80 plus pages. And then we have our recruiters trying to swim through all of that to find a patient from a database, and two, find a study from a database. It's a hard job, a very hard job. So whatever we can do to make their lives easier and more efficient, we would gladly invest in it. I've also developed the chatbots to help our recruiters narrow down, and having a database is actually fed into that to some extent, because I can run a report of the different studies we have and basically have a live pool of, we have all these studies, which feeds into a chatbot, which is local, which will be like, okay, patient X qualifies for blank, 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 because they have indication blank, 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 blank. Talk to coordinator blank, and then from there, the following steps happen, and they either get randomized or screen failed. Chatbots are cool and all, but it's also about the adoption of it. We have one, but our staff, they're not as young, so not all will utilize it. And also, once you've been a recruiter for a certain period of time, you already know the studies. You can give someone tools, but you can't make them use it.
AI augmentation is going to take generations. That's one of my objectives for this year, is actually to start to adopt little levels of AI augmentation, just enough for me to say I tried it. Going back to we're drowning in data but starving for information. Sometimes it feels like, especially some of the sponsor-based databases, especially feasibility, they try to collect way more information than they need to make a decision on site selection.
Yeah, and why do you think all these sites, they can give you like 100% accurate information, because they don't have 100% accurate information. All they can do is estimate, and the more detailed questions you ask, the harder it makes the whole process. And then sponsors complain, oh, this site's taking so long to get started up, and then sites are like, I wonder why.
I wonder why. Look at these 50 feasibilities.
Different things that you have to go through just to recruit your first patient. Whatever can be done to streamline that is very welcome.
How do you think we can optimize the use of the databases in clinical trial screening and recruitment?
As dumb of an answer it is to say, but it really just depends, because every site is just so different. Choosing how to optimize your business with the database, it really depends on your patients, your staff, your studies. All I can really advise is know that there's tools, technologies, people that can help you develop it. And once you get to a certain point, it's important to develop your foundation. Otherwise, once you scale and grow, something might crack at the bottom. Be conscious of the data you're making, producing, storing, treat it responsibly. For example, if you build a database, you're doing all this work, you're recruiting patients, you're going through randomization, screening, screen fills, whatever. Your database becomes 20,000, and then your recruiters aren't actually putting in any of the medical history. How are you supposed to know what you're actually capable of recruiting for or not? Value the data that you're creating and categorize it, and that's kind of how you optimize. You don't necessarily need to optimize now, but you need to create that foundation so that whenever it's time to analyze and see what's going wrong, you're able to make those dynamic changes. It really just is a tool that you're able to kind of make reactive decisions on based on what's happening in your company. You can track that sort of stuff. Because you have access and you're able to see all the different things that are happening, you can stop it dead in its track.
I really like the word you said was foundation. So you've got to have a strong foundation when it comes to building and structuring your data so that you are collecting the proper data to make good and conscious decisions.
Yeah. And then also your coordinators already have like a hard enough job. Do whatever you can to make it a little bit more simplistic. If you need to outsource or hire or do some code modification so that things are automatic or are easier to enter or whatever the case might be, just do it in advance, because it might take you like an hour now, but it'll probably save hours and hours and hours over the course of the year that you're using it. It might seem like very tedious work, but I believe it's very important.
Coming from a site owner's perspective, for any of the site owners out there listening, I think that it might be really relevant to try to find someone and bring them on your team who has this kind of a skill set. So if you were going to talk to anyone in the nation who is having a challenge with tech and getting frustrated with the opportunities and things like that, what kind of a background on a team member would you recommend they might be looking for to try to get this kind of skill set in their site?
I'd just say someone who maybe has a little bit of ERP experience with databases. You don't even need SQL knowledge or anything like that, because there's so many different tools out there. But if you are interested in starting something from scratch, you're probably going to need someone who's like a full stack developer, someone who understands a lot about data and how to secure it, what HIPAA actually means and how to abide by it. The more custom you go, more expensive it gets. The technical knowledge will vary so much because there's so many different solutions out there. Just find a solution and find a person that works with that solution.
That makes sense. And maybe find a person who's willing to learn the new solutions for your site. The flexibility to learn and the flexibility to adopt is very, very key.
Flexibility is like the one thing you can't teach, so it's something you should definitely look for in interviews.
If I were to hand you the microphone right now and I said, what would you like to tell the entire industry about patient databases and how they can work at our sites for patient recruitment and screening? What would you tell them?
It's really important to develop your foundation. Otherwise, whenever you scale and grow, you'll start to see a lot of issues happen at the back end. Recruiters are how your coordinators are able to actually go and do their jobs and screen and randomize and all that. So having a streamlined, organized, efficient way to actually manage your different vendors, your patients, whatever, it's really, really important because the more clogs you throw into the machine, everything else slows down. It's a chain reaction. So it's really important to have a strong foundation so that you can weather the test of time.
Get a very, very strong foundation, keep it simple and streamlined, and importantly, be willing to flex your site so that when it scales and grows, you have the capacity across your databases to grow with it. As a result, your databases can keep up with the increased demand for patient recruitment and screening across your trials.
And I think it's really important, and I love to see all the different innovations that have been happening, but I think that some of the sites need to also do some of the innovation because they're the ones who are boots on the ground and seeing everything. Hopefully we'll see some more site inspired or site owner co-created different platforms and other things.
You are absolutely right, Samir. Sites are the independent business owners who are running this industry, and their voice is going to be key. What really strikes me about what you're doing is you're owning it. You're taking control and you're literally customizing an entire solution around the needs of your site, and that's brilliant.
It might seem like a big task, but when you think about it, all we do is data. We're collecting data so that sponsors can move up the phases. Might as well have a good system. I'm a lazy person, and I consider that one of my biggest flaws and my greatest strengths because I like to develop solutions so that once it's built, hands off.
Samir, importantly, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central today. An excellent conversation, and I can't wait to compare this to the other speaker, and I can't wait to show this to the audience.
All right. I had a great time, Daniel. Thank you so much for inviting me on.
All right. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Our next guest has substantial experience in regulatory, administration, and technology leadership and solutions. Arati Bhosale is the co-founder of Sieve Health, an organization dedicated to leveraging AI technology to accelerate clinical research. Artie's experience from co-founder at Sieve to many different positions across sites, SMOs, sponsors, and CROs make her an excellent expert in the field, and I am so grateful that she is taking the time to speak with us today. Please welcome with me Dr. Arati Bhosale. Dr. Arati Bhosale, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central today.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm glad to be here. It's an honor.
Would you be willing to introduce yourself to the audience?
My name is Dr. Arati Bhosale. I'm a clinical research professional closing in on 15 years. I'm a clinician. I'm a dentist by profession, by education. I did practice for a few years and I was planning to be an oral surgeon, but life had different plans for me. While pursuing my master's, I got a chance to work in oncology in oral health sector or therapeutic area, which is what completely changed my perspective, and it opened up the clinical research side of healthcare. I got to experience it firsthand and it changed my perspective on how I want to pursue my career, how I want to contribute to this field. So I chose to stick with clinical research and I have been for past 15 years. That's my background, and I have played different roles over the years working in clinical research in different therapeutic areas, which have been oncology, cardiology, maternal and child health, clinical psychology as well.
Wow, what a background.
Thank you. It has given me the opportunity to learn from a lot of different perspectives. A lot of these different things are done in different therapeutic areas. I mean, there are a lot of generic workflows or processes that carry across all therapeutic areas as clinical research operations go. And I have played in different roles, mostly have been on the site side, site operations, being a coordinator, being a sub-I, being a manager. I've worked with SMOs. Also, there was a part where I also worked from a sponsor side for a little bit. In my most recent role, I have been a founder, and so startup world.
So, Artie, can you tell me about your startup?
I am a co-founder of Sieve Health. It leverages AI technology, and not just the basic AI, but the core AI, like natural language processing, to kind of streamline the patient enrollment workflows. It does not just mean kind of scanning through the patient databases or patient medical records and identifying those patients that would be eligible for a given trial. But there are so many different ways you can leverage technologies, including AI, to kind of streamline these processes. But for that, you need to have understanding of the core workflows. And so our focus is on patient enrollment workflows. We are using or leveraging the technology to streamline different parts of those workflows and from both different arms, because part of enrollment happens at a site level, patient enrollments, and a part comes from sponsor CRO and patient recruitment agencies and marketing and all of the direct to patient routes. So there are different ways. Patient enrollment doesn't just mean finding the patients, getting them consented. That's not what it is. That's oversimplification. Sieve Health has a centralized platform as well, which helps connect different stakeholders, including sponsors, CROs, sites, keeping everybody on the same page. So we do leverage the technology for a few different things: finding the patients, tracking the patients, and managing them centrally and managing the data centrally. And also we have a lot of different creative ways of how sites can use this to kind of streamline their patient enrollment site operations.
And I can tell you from hearing so many different sites, that is a huge pain point when it comes to recruitment and enrollment, is that management of that database.
Yes.
Whether it's the site's database or it's the sponsor's database or it's a central recruiter's database, one way or the other, there's a database or multiple databases somewhere. They're an absolute nightmare to manage. The one interesting thing that I love about Sieve Health is what it does for a lot of the freestanding sites, specifically freestanding sites that maybe do not have access to EMRs or they're not integrated into hospital systems, so that they kind of have to have their own standalone patient databases. Can you tell me how Sieve Health helps with that?
So Sieve does have a flagship feature, or one of our main features that we rolled out with is where we connect or integrate into the electronic medical records. But like you mentioned, that's one of the databases. But there are different types of sites, there are different types of databases that the sites use, like you mentioned. I have experienced this firsthand myself, working in all these different roles. And that's why when we designed Sieve, it is also designed not to just require an integration into an EMR database and then mine that data to find patients, but also it can help you kind of go through the other databases as well. And it can be through integration or other ways to kind of do that, and allows the site the ownership of their own data, allows the sites to kind of centralize their own data in a way and basically use that. We are actually automating the existing processes. We are leveraging technology to do what the sites are doing, just enabling them to do it in a digital way. It allows them to have better transparency, better control of that data, better centralization, and you can do so much with that. They are sitting on this data, but there is just so much manual efforts that go into this. Our focus is on kind of reducing that administrative burden and improving transparency around it and allowing the sites to use that data in a much more efficient manner.
Today's topic is patient or participant databases, specifically those databases that sites generate, collect, and reference so that we can screen patients and then recruit patients into clinical trials. I'm going to ask ask you a series of questions today,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to ask those questions to another individual at another time.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to compare your answers to the answers of the other individual
Mm-hmm.
so that maybe we can see some alignment in the utilization of patient databases, so that maybe we can try to find how to optimize their use in our industry.
Such a creative way, Daniel, of kind of understanding the user experience and kind of identifying that. I love it.
Can you walk me through your understanding of the creation and the use of these patient databases for clinical trial recruitment?
Sites are dealing with different kinds of patient databases, one of which is the healthcare providers that these sites work with. They can have their own individual electronic medical records databases, the EMR databases, each one of them. Many times they provide sites access into these databases to kind of find those patients and all of that. Then the sites basically gather those medical records for the patients who they find from the pre-screening and everything. Then they are using that information from those medical records. They do data entry into their own systems because sites have their own CTMS. They might have some of their homegrown patient registry database. They manually grab all this data from the patient's medical records, manually enter parts and pieces of that data, and plus sites deal with clinical trial database, and these are all these different portals that they receive from sponsors or CROs of a given trial. Oh my god, it's going out of control. Like for every trial on average, I'm guessing there are 8 to 10 portals that they have to deal with, and so you have to maintain all those usernames, passwords, and learn all those systems and enter the same data over and over and over again into all these databases.
And all for different purposes, different reasons. And even the process of getting the medical records from healthcare institutions can be sometimes an absolute nightmare.
It can be. That's why it is also still, in so many cases, working on an archaic model where requesting the medical records, it either comes through emails or fax. Then it's all fragmented because it depends on which site personnel is requesting it. If that person is out of office for whatever reason, the other people in the office have no idea what's going on. It adds a lot of administrative burden on the sites just to work with these kind of databases.
And especially with like HIPAA and confidentiality laws and things like that, unless you are an embedded department in a healthcare organization, if you're a standalone site, sometimes you are not a prioritized requester.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a very long time sometimes to get these records, and it can be very challenging.
It can be.
Obviously, there's a reason why databases are coming together. There's an intention behind them, even though sometimes they can be kind of burdensome. What do you think are the benefits of using these databases to screen and recruit patients?
There are benefits there because it is holding a lot of data, and data is gold these days. Basically, rather than going randomly about it or putting the burden on the physicians to kind of identify these patients, because it's not humanly possible, even for investigators, no matter how many pocket cards you give them or posters you put in the exam rooms or all these different strategies. I mean, and all these need to happen in parallel, which is fine, but the burden cannot be alone on the physician to identify this patient. So that's where these databases do bring value because it allows other team members to scan through those databases and pre-screen and identify at least a few patients who could benefit from participation, and then discuss those with the healthcare providers, give them a jump start. I mean, they appreciate that too. That's where the value from these databases come, because they have a lot of information which can help with a lot of matching patients with the right trials.
And I would imagine that the larger your database, the more likely your feasibilities, even before you find patients, are going to be a little more accurate.
Yes, so it does bring in value by bringing the opportunity of an proactive approach, because that's the value patient databases bring, is like you said, with feasibility, not just feasibility, but even with kind of of enrollment forecast. Because yes, feasibility historically it's kind of a guesswork, but when you are able to use these kind of patient databases and leverage the information from within, then you can have the benefit of a better enrollment forecast, which in turn improves your site's trust with your sponsors and CROs. It helps you plan your own workload. What trials you should be taking on? Do we really have patients for this?
Even before feasibilities, let's say that you have a patient database that says you have a large number of patients with diabetes or an older population that might have more arthritis. It would actually allow sites to target the trials that would work very well in their patient populations.
Exactly. It helps you understand the composition of your patient population that you're serving. Having that understanding helps in a lot of ways. What kind of trials should you be bringing on? What is going to be more helpful? And then even building that trust with sponsors and those strategic partnerships with sponsors and CROs that, okay, we are catering to these kind of patients. These are the kind of trials we are looking for. It gives the ownership back to sites rather than accepting whatever comes through the door. Kind of having a more strategic approach towards it and even being proactive about it. Okay, we are this site, we serve these kind of patients, and this is what our data shows. We know we can be a success to your trials.
That definitely opens the door for diversity as well,
Exactly.
because then you'd know the diversity of your patient populations.
Definitely. I like to take a data based approach even to diverse participation in trials. This is an amazing initiative. Data actually just gives you a better understanding of what is feasible and what is not, rather than just going in blindly and then playing the blame game that you are not doing your job.
Well, and it brings a level of visibility not only to the sites who are helping to serve their communities, but also to the sponsors.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think that sponsors might be writing protocols with certain requirements, inclusion, exclusion. You're trying to recruit impossible patients.
Mhm.
And having that kind of a database in front of you maybe even help when they're writing the protocols.
Yes, that is another benefit of it, even though it's a long term benefit, or basically for that you need to have a bigger volume of data. Yes, these databases do cater to that need as well, that the trials can be designed for the real world. Because many times, traditionally, these trials are understandably designed for the perfect patient, which doesn't exist. Then we have trouble enrolling. And why not design for the real world? Because I understand why they are trying to enroll patients which are perfect, because there are regulations based. There is so much that has gone into a given trial. You want to get the molecule, the new medicine approved, get through all these phases and get to the approval stage and all. But if it doesn't serve, or if it is not designed for the real world, even if you get through all those approvals, it's not going to do that fine post approval in the market, which is what is happening. That's what the pharma industry is realizing, and that's why there is push for more real world evidence and designing for the real world, even the trials. And that's where these databases can provide value, because they provide that visibility of what is out there and what they should be designing for.
What do you think are the challenges that we face when we use these patient databases for trial screenings and recruitment?
Oh, the number one challenge is the quality of data itself. Because all of a sudden, I mean, this is amazing. It's such a no brainer. When hit with reality, the reality is the quality of data is not that great. It's a cascading effect. If the data quality is not that great, then how are you going to get any good insights out of it? There was this old saying, garbage in, garbage out. It still applies. The quality of data that goes into it is the results you're going to get based on that, and it's not the technology's fault. And so there are a lot of efforts actually going on in that to improve the quality of data itself, because a lot of solutions are facing this problem, this hurdle, and there is a lot of push on improving the data quality itself. And the other hurdle is, of course, interoperability, because all these different databases are designed in a very different way, because that's just how it began. Everybody was designing from their own perspective, from their own understanding. It is difficult to think 10-50 years down the line and how it's gonna be required. So now there is a big push, okay, how can we build bridges, basically. So the logic applies the same way. Okay, let's follow a common set of rules, at least going forward, and slowly kind of, change.
I would imagine that even data quality itself influences interoperability.
Yes, it does. And then it kind of further extends into the third hurdle is data harmonization, meaning the databases itself are structured differently and the data itself can be indifferent because everybody gathers different kinds of data or manages it differently.
What compromises the quality of the data?
Well, the differences in the people who are capturing the data itself or the systems that are capturing the data itself. And it is very manual process. It's very administrative heavy process. And our systems don't allow for managing that kind of volume. It's not easy to gather that much amount of data, enter all of that data and save it. That itself is a full-time job on top of patient care. And then patient care always takes priority over everything else. And so, of course, it affects the quality of data.
That makes sense. And of course, I would imagine if we have interoperability, it also means we have totally different protocols across the industry on how to collect the data,
Yep.
where to collect the data,
Yep.
what format to put the data. So I would imagine it's like a wild, wild west out there
Yes.
as far as standardization of data entry, even data quality. Is there a
Yes.
standardization for data quality? Is there a way to assess data quality?
Only to the structured part of it, because the generic parts that can be applied across all kinds of databases, but that's only what, maybe 20-30% of the data. Everything else is free form in the way how it's collected, how it's written, every based on the user who's entering the data. And all those user subjectivity gets incorporated into the data itself.
How may we optimize the use of these databases for clinical trial screening and recruitment?
The baseline of all of this is use the data from these databases to improve the understanding itself of what's going around you. It helps with the proactive approach, which is what is lacking in our industry. We have always been traditionally a reactive industry. What I value the most with data is the benefit or the chance it gives the user to take an proactive approach.
I always found it is always harder to be proactive when you are feeling a state of emergency or you're feeling rushed. Using patient databases correctly might be able to give us that respite that we need to really take a step back and make good decisions about what we're doing and not just trying to fill up space with these timelines that are just obnoxious.
I agree. And I agree with the point that it is difficult to be proactive in a state of emergency. But that's the thing. Using data the right way can help us even avoid the emergency situations. Most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, it will allow us to even avoid those situations and plan correctly.
If I were to hand you the microphone right now and I just said, what would you like to tell the entire audience about patient databases and how we can use them in clinical research? What would you tell them?
I would say don't be scared of them. It's not a popular topic, patient databases or data entry or using that data. But again, also on the flip side, everybody agrees that we need to do this. But then comes in the frustration that, oh my God, this is crappy. The data itself is crappy. How are we going to build anything based on this? But rather than giving into those frustrations, I would say let's work together to address all of these hurdles for a better future for our own industry. It has come a long way, but it has a long journey ahead of it too. This is an integral part of what we do. And if we want to do what we do in a better way, data is going to be the basis of it. And so we have to acknowledge that and not be afraid of it and figure out ways of how to do things right way. It is a tall order. Don't be naive that it's gonna be like, we will do few things and it will be a rosy picture going forward. No, let's not be naive. It is gonna be difficult, but it is gonna be worth it.
Don't be afraid of the data. Don't be afraid of the databases. Know that it is an integral part of what we do. In fact, we do what we do to collect data. So we need to be able to adopt it, make it better, and importantly, really be open to utilizing it to enhance what we do for our patients.
You got it.
Arati, thank you so much for coming on to CRPN Central. An excellent topic, and I look forward to sharing this with the audience.
Awesome. Thank you for having me and thanks for this opportunity.
I will talk to you later.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.
Samir is creating his own Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP, software solutions to ensure Prolado has the technological foundations it needs to grow and scale its trial opportunities throughout the industry. Sites often meet their fundamental baselines with Excel spreadsheets, siloed processes, and cookie-cutter solutions. However, after a few years, they may have to invest their retained earnings to meet the foundational requirements needed to scale beyond their boundaries. The industry is getting out of control with its fragmented point solutions, and when Samir develops these solutions on his own, one of the most important components is simply to consult with his end users to learn what they need to reduce as much burden as possible. And although powerful, our industry is drowning in data, but starving for information. To address this, we must structure data correctly and collect it responsibly with internal standards that simplify categorizing, structuring, and separating if we want to build the strong foundation needed to advance our site's activities. Every site will be different, with different levels of need, and although our front lines are far from being lazy, we may leverage our drive to reduce burden with streamlined and efficient systems as our greatest strength. Arati has worked in the clinical research industry from coordinator to sub-I to oncology and clinical psychology with SMOs, CROs, sponsors, and sites for over 15 years. Now, as co-founder of Sieve Health, she is building AI-structured core workflows to help sites manage their trials, categorize their data, and reduce their overall administrative burdens. The sheer numbers of databases sites must use with their passwords, logins, and logistics is getting obnoxious, and data really is gold for so many different industry activities because it helps to ensure our efforts are not random, but instead they focus proactive searches to help in forecasting, planning, workloads, trial targeting, and importantly, participant recruitment. The challenges to databases are data quality itself, interoperability, and data harmonization that, when neglected, cause garbage in and consequentially garbage out at no fault of the technology itself. And it can only exacerbate with manually entered data entry processes that provide a continual data quality risk. And although it will not be an overnight solution, and we still have many lessons to learn, we should not be scared of these databases, but rather embrace them as an integral part of this industry's future ability to improve and advance our society. Both of today's guests confirmed not only the undeniable value of data in our industry, but also the overwhelming burden of the fragmented solution states that we are in. And while Samir stressed the importance of exploring customized solutions and strong data foundations for site scaling and growth, Arati emphasized the value of proactive approaches that do not fear databases, but rather embrace them as powerful tools in our businesses and our industries. So, how do we utilize databases to optimize potential trial participant recruitment for efficient and productive clinical research performance? Samir and Arati, although slightly different in current tenure and perspective, both highlighted critical and similar recommendations. To properly apply database utilization at our clinical research sites, we must focus closely on proactivity, strong foundations, and curiosity. Listen to our end users and adapt software to their needs. Build streamlined quality by design processes that ensure we are collecting only the data that we need in proper and standardized formats. And never be afraid to explore new business solutions that help us to advance not only how we recruit for and perform trials, but also how we can bring rapid and quality research to our communities for generations to come. Thank you for tuning in to today's database episode. Databases hold immense potential to help us do our best in this industry, as long as we can figure out how to wield them responsibly and efficiently on our front lines. If you are drowning in data and are ready to take your site to the next level, heed advice from Samir to be sure to explore the options that we now have, or reach out to Sieve Health to learn about what they can do to help. Thank you to Samir and Arati for sharing their stories and their expertise today. Thank you to Darshan Kulkarni, Raven Hicks, and Antonio Tito for volunteering in today's CRP in Short. Finally, thank you to my CRPN sponsors for making this podcast possible. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time on CRPN Central.